Get your black hands off that piano, you filthy animal!
Man, I ain't hurting nothing.
You stink like a dumpster, and you're touching a $500,000 instrument. Know your place.
Know my place? My place is right here on this bench.
Security, get this stray out of my lobby.
They grabbed him, dragged him. Adrian yanked free.
Please, just let me play one piece. That's all I'm asking. I'll leave after, I swear. Just let me play.
The manager smirked.
Go ahead. Show us what the gutter taught you.
Adrian sat down, pressed 3 notes on that $500,000 Steinway. A woman at the bar set down her glass. Nobody knew her face, but she owned this hotel. What happened next cost that manager everything. His job, his reputation, and every ounce of pride he had left. Man, you'd think that's the craziest part. But wait till you hear how this guy ended up on the streets in the first place.
The Steinway Model D sat in the center of the Grand Meridian lobby like a throne nobody was allowed to touch. Black lacquer, so polished it mirrored the chandeliers above. Velvet ropes on all 4 sides. A brass plaque read, "Display only. Do not touch." It was a Saturday afternoon. Guests in pressed linen drifted between the concierge desk and the marble bar. Bellhops wheeled luggage across floors that cost more per square foot than most apartments. Nobody noticed the man who slipped through the revolving door. Adrian Ashworth moved like someone used to being invisible. Torn olive jacket, a backpack held together with duct tape, boots with no laces. His beard had grown past the point of style into the territory of survival. He didn't head for the front desk, his eyes locked on one thing, the piano.
He stood 10 feet away, just looking. His fingers twitched at his sides, curling and uncurling against the fabric of his jeans. The muscle memory was still there. It lived in his tendons like a second heartbeat. The velvet rope was only waist high. Adrian stepped over it, sat down on the bench, lifted the fallboard. The scent of spruce and aged felt rose from the keys, a smell that punched through 8 years of concrete and shelter cots and cold nights under overpasses.
His right hand hovered over the ivory. "Sir?" The voice came from behind, sharp, loud enough for the whole lobby. "Step away from the instrument." 2 security guards. Craig, 6'2", shaved head, hand already on Adrian's shoulder. His partner flanked the other side. Vincent Hale, the hotel's general manager, appeared from the elevator bank. Navy suit, gold cufflinks. He walked toward the scene the way a man walks toward a stain on his carpet. "The hell is this?"
"Vagrant on the Steinway, Mr. Hale."
Vincent looked at Adrian, not at him, through him. The way you look at something you want removed.
"You stink like a dumpster," Vincent said, loud enough for the nearest 30 guests, "and you're touching a $500,000 instrument." Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. "I just wanted to play."
Vincent laughed. He pulled hand sanitizer from his breast pocket, squeezed it onto the piano bench, rubbed it with a handkerchief. "Get this animal out of here." Craig yanked Adrian off the bench. His backpack hit the marble. A water bottle rolled out, spinning in a slow circle.
But in the 3 seconds before they pulled him away, Adrian's fingers had found the keys. 3 notes: C, E flat, G. They rang through the lobby's vaulted ceiling, bounced off marble and crystal, hung in the air like a question nobody knew how to answer. At the far end of the bar, a silver-haired woman in a charcoal blazer set down her glass of Sancerre. Her hand didn't tremble from age. It trembled from recognition. She stood. "Stop!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime being obeyed. "Let him play."
Every head in the Grand Meridian lobby turned. The guards froze. Vincent's mouth opened, then closed, and Adrian Ashworth, dragged across marble like garbage, looked up at the woman who had just changed everything with 2 words. He didn't know her name yet, but those 3 notes did.
12 years earlier, Adrian Ashworth was the kind of name professors whispered about in faculty lounges. Whitmore Conservatory, full scholarship, 19 years old. Fingers that moved across a keyboard like they'd been born there. Because in a way, they had. His mother, Catherine Ashworth, worked the night shift at St. Jerome's Hospital. Registered nurse, 12-hour rotations. She came home at 6 in the morning with swollen ankles and the smell of antiseptic in her hair. But every single night before she left for work, she sat in the hallway outside Adrian's bedroom and listened to him practice. She never knocked, never interrupted, just sat there on the hardwood floor with her back against the wall and her eyes closed. When Adrian was 6, Catherine sold her car, a 1998 Honda Civic with 190,000 miles on it. Got $1,200 for it. She took 3 buses to work for the next 2 years so she could buy a second-hand upright piano from a church that was closing down. The piano had a cracked middle C. Adrian learned to love the imperfection. He told his mother it gave the instrument character.
By 14, he was performing at regional competitions. By 16, he'd won the Ellsworth Young Pianists Award, the youngest winner in 40 years. By 18, Whitmore offered him a full ride. Professor Harold Stein called him once in a generation. But it was Maestro Theodore Graves who changed everything. Graves was 81, retired from concert performance. He took on 1 student per year, sometimes none. The audition wasn't a performance. It was a conversation. Graves sat Adrian down in his study, poured 2 cups of tea, and asked him one question. "Why do you play?" Adrian said, "Because my mother sold her car so I could." Graves accepted him that afternoon. Over the next year, Graves taught Adrian things that weren't in any textbook. How to breathe between phrases. How to let silence do the work. How to make an audience lean forward without playing a single note louder. And in the final month, Graves gave Adrian something he'd never given anyone else in 40 years of teaching. A composition. His own. Sonata in C minor. A piece he'd written decades ago and never published, never performed, never recorded. "This is yours now," Graves said. "Play it when you're ready. You'll know when." Adrian memorized every note, every dynamic marking, every pause. He never got the chance to perform it. November 14th. Rain. Catherine was driving home after a double shift. She'd picked up an extra rotation to pay for Adrian's formal concert suit. His first professional recital was 3 weeks away. The truck ran a red light at the intersection of Maple and 5th. Catherine died on impact. Adrian was in the passenger seat. He survived. But his left wrist shattered in 4 places. The surgeons rebuilt it with 2 titanium plates and 7 screws. 3 operations over 5 months. Dr. Langford was honest. "You'll have functional mobility. You'll be able to write, carry groceries, button a shirt. But concert-level dexterity?" He paused. "I wouldn't build a future around it." Whitmore revoked the scholarship. Not cruelly. They called it a medical leave of absence. But the door closed, and nobody opened it again. Adrian tried. He took a job washing dishes at a diner on 4th Street, paid rent on a studio apartment the size of a parking space, practiced scales at night with a wrist that screamed after 20 minutes. The diner closed. Then the apartment. Then the shelter had a wait list.
Then the shelter didn't have a wait list, but Adrian couldn't stay sober enough to follow the rules. Then the streets. 8 years. 8 years of park benches and soup kitchens and sleeping under overpasses with one arm curled around his backpack because if someone stole it, they'd take the only thing he had left, a photograph of his mother sitting on the hallway floor outside his bedroom, eyes closed, listening. He never stopped playing. Not really. Every night, wherever he slept, Adrian pressed his fingers against his thigh and ran through Graves's sonata from memory. Every note, every rest, every dynamic. The music lived in his hands the way blood lived in his veins. Quietly. Constantly. Whether anyone was listening or not. Maestro Graves died in 2016. Adrian found out 3 months later from a newspaper someone left on a bus stop bench. He sat there for an hour, pressing invisible keys against his knee, playing the sonata one more time. For a dead man who had believed in him. For a dead mother who had sold her car. For a version of himself that the world had thrown away. The rain started at 2 in the afternoon. Not a drizzle, a downpour. The kind that turns gutters into rivers and makes cardboard shelters dissolve in minutes. Adrian had been sitting under the awning of a closed laundromat on 7th Street when the wind shifted and the rain found him anyway. His jacket soaked through in seconds. His backpack, the one with the photograph, he tucked under his shirt against his chest. He walked. No destination, just movement. Movement was warmth. Stillness was death in weather like this. The Grand Meridian Hotel appeared at the corner of 7th and Lancaster like a cathedral made of glass and money. Revolving doors, doormen in long coats, town cars pulling up to the curb. Adrian didn't plan to go inside. He just needed a dry spot. 30 seconds under a roof. Maybe a bathroom where he could wring out his sleeves. He slipped through the revolving door behind a couple arguing about dinner reservations. Nobody stopped him. Nobody looked. The lobby hit him like a memory. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, the hum of wealth, quiet conversations, clinking glasses, the soft click of expensive shoes. And in the center of it all, raised on a low platform behind velvet ropes, spotlit like a jewel in a museum case, a Steinway Model D. Adrian stopped walking. 9 feet of black lacquer. The lid propped open at full stick, exposing the harp and strings inside like the ribs of some magnificent animal. The brass plaque at the base caught the light. Display only. Do not touch. Value, $500,000. He stood 10 feet away, dripping on the marble, invisible. His fingers started moving before his brain caught up, curling against his palms, stretching. The tendons in his left wrist ached. They always ached, but the fingers still knew the shapes, still knew the intervals. 20 minutes he stood there, watching guests walk past the piano without a second glance, watching a bellhop roll a luggage cart so close the brass fittings nearly scraped the lid, watching a child, a girl, maybe 7, tug her mother's hand and point. "Mommy, can I play it?" "No, sweetie, it's not for playing. It's for looking." Something broke inside Adrian when he heard that. Not for playing. A piano. Not for playing. He thought about Catherine, about the cracked middle C on the church piano she'd bought with a sold car and 2 years of bus rides. That piano was beaten and scarred and out of tune, and it was the most played instrument in the state of Virginia, because Adrian touched it every single day for 12 years. Pianos are built to be played. That's what they're for. That's the only thing they're for. He crossed the lobby, stepped over the velvet rope. The bench was cool under his wet jeans. He lifted the fallboard. The keys were pristine, untouched, perfect ivory and ebony, stretching left to right, like a road he used to know by heart. The smell hit him first. Spruce, felt, lacquer. The interior of a concert grand has a scent that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth, and Adrian hadn't smelled it in 8 years. His right hand found middle C, pressed it. The note bloomed through the lobby, warm and round and impossibly full. A Steinway D doesn't just make sound, it fills architecture. His left hand joined, slower, stiffer. The pinky lagged, the ring finger trembled. But the shapes were there, the intervals were there. Muscle memory carved so deep that 8 years of cold and hunger and concrete couldn't erase it. He played 3 notes. C, E flat, G. The opening chord of Graves' sonata in C minor. And that was as far as he got. "Sir!" A hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Step away from the instrument, now!" Bro, 8 years without touching a piano. 8 years. And his fingers still moved on their own. Imagine that's you. Imagine the one thing you love most gets ripped away, and your body still won't let it go. That's not talent. That's something deeper. Craig's hand wasn't gentle. It dug into the muscle between Adrian's neck and shoulder, the kind of grip designed to make a man stand whether he wanted to or not. "I said, step away." Adrian stood. The bench scraped against the platform. The sound cut through the lobby like a scratch on glass. Craig's partner, a shorter man with a buzz cut and a jaw like a cinder block, grabbed Adrian's other arm. Together they marched him off the platform, past the velvet ropes, toward the center of the lobby, where every guest with a cocktail could see. Vincent Hale was already there, waiting, arms crossed. The kind of man who needed witnesses for his authority to mean anything. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" Vincent said, not quietly. He wanted an audience, and the Grand Meridian lobby gave him one. 30, 40 guests, plus staff, plus the bartender who'd stopped polishing glasses to watch. Adrian kept his eyes on the floor. "I just wanted to play, that's all." Play. Vincent tasted the word like it was spoiled milk. You walked into a 5-star hotel looking like you crawled out of a sewer. You put your hands on a $500,000 Steinway, and you want me to believe you can play? "I can. I studied at—" "You studied?" Vincent laughed, not a real laugh, the performative kind, the kind meant to invite others to join. A woman near the concierge desk covered her mouth. A man in a polo shirt smirked into his bourbon. "Let me guess. Juilliard? Curtis? Maybe you're secretly a concert pianist who just happens to live in a cardboard box." Vincent stepped closer. His cologne was sharp, sandalwood and money. "Look at you. Look at your hands. Look at your fingernails. You think anyone in this building believes you can play that instrument?" Adrian said nothing. His left hand was shaking, not from anger, from the cold, from the rain still soaking through his clothes, from 8 years of never being warm enough. "You know what I think?" Vincent pulled the hand sanitizer from his breast pocket, squeezed a line of it onto the piano bench where Adrian had been sitting, took out his handkerchief, monogrammed, cream-colored, and rubbed the bench clean, slowly, deliberately, making sure every person in the lobby saw him do it. "I think you're a stray who wandered in from the rain, and strays belong outside." The lobby was silent. 50 people, not one voice. A teenager near the window held up her phone. Recording. The red dot
blinked. Craig shoved Adrian toward the revolving door. Adrian stumbled. His backpack fell. The zipper was broken. It had been broken for months, and the contents spilled across the marble. A water bottle, a wool hat with a hole in it, a toothbrush worn down to the nub, and a photograph, creased, water-stained, edges soft from years of handling, of a woman sitting on a hardwood floor with her back against a wall and her eyes closed.
Adrian dropped to his knees. Not because they pushed him, because the photograph was on the floor, and that was the only thing in the world that mattered. He picked it up, held it against his chest. Craig reached for his arm again. "Please!" Adrian's voice cracked. "Please, just let me play one piece. One. If I can't play, I leave. I'll never come back. You'll never see me again."
Vincent looked at Craig, looked at the lobby full of guests who were now very much paying attention, looked at the teenager with the phone. He could have said no, should have said no. But Vincent Hale was the kind of man who enjoyed watching people fail in public. It was a sport to him, and right now he had a stadium full of spectators.
"You know what? Fine." Vincent spread his arms wide, grinned.
"Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special performance this evening. Our guest from the streets is going to show us what a $500,000 piano sounds like when it's played by a man who can't afford a pair of shoelaces." Scattered laughter. Nervous, uncomfortable, but laughter. "Go ahead." Vincent gestured toward the Steinway with a mock bow. "Show us what the gutter taught you."
Adrian stood.
His knees were wet from the marble. His hands were trembling. He walked back to the piano, stepped over the velvet rope, sat down. The bench was still damp from the sanitizer. He placed his fingers on the keys. Right hand steady, left hand stiff, the pinky barely reaching the octave span. The titanium plates in his wrist clicked faintly as he adjusted his position. Only he could hear it. He closed his eyes.
And somewhere behind him, at the far end of the bar, a silver-haired woman in a charcoal blazer leaned forward in her seat.
She hadn't said a word yet, but she was listening. Eleanor Whitfield had been drinking Sancerre at the Grand Meridian bar for exactly 47 minutes when the commotion started.
She wasn't there for leisure. She was there because the hotel's ownership group had offered her the naming rights to their new event space, and she was deciding whether the brand association was worth the check. Eleanor owned 5 concert halls across the country. The Whitfield name on a building meant something in the world of classical music. 68 years old. Silver hair cut short and precise. A charcoal blazer over a black silk blouse. No jewelry except a single ring, a thin gold band her late husband had given her 40 years ago. She didn't need ornaments. Her presence was the ornament. Before she was a businesswoman, Eleanor was a pianist, a real one. She'd performed at Carnegie Hall at 23, toured Europe at 25, recorded 3 albums that critics called technically flawless but emotionally restrained, a description that bothered her more than she ever admitted. It was Theodore Graves who taught her how to feel. She'd studied under Graves for 2 years in her 20s. He was already old then, sharp and demanding and impossibly kind in the same breath. He never yelled. He just played a passage the way it was supposed to sound, and then looked at you until you understood what you'd done wrong. Graves had composed the sonata in C minor when he was 35, a piece born out of grief. His first wife had died of cancer, and the sonata was everything he couldn't say at her funeral. He never published it, never performed it publicly. He considered it too personal, too raw. But he taught it to a handful of students over 4 decades, the ones he believed could carry it without breaking it. Eleanor was one of them. She hadn't heard those opening notes, C, E flat, G.
played by anyone other than herself in over 30 years. Until now. The three notes hit her like a door slamming open in a quiet house. Her hand froze around the stem of her wine glass. The conversation she'd been having with the hotel's CFO dissolved mid-sentence. She turned toward the piano. A homeless man. Torn jacket. No laces. Being dragged away by two security guards while the general manager performed his little sanitizer routine for the audience. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She watched the man's belongings spill across the marble. Watched him drop to his knees for a photograph. Watched him beg, actually beg, to play one piece. And she watched Vincent Hale turn it into a circus. Show us what the gutter taught you.
The man sat back down at the Steinway, placed his fingers on the keys, and Eleanor saw something that nobody else in that lobby could have possibly noticed. His hand position, the angle of his wrists, the curve of his fingers, the way his thumbs tucked, not flat against the keys like an amateur, but angled inward at precisely 15 degrees, creating a fulcrum point that allowed maximum force with minimum tension.
That was Graves' technique. Graves taught that exact hand position. Nobody else in the world taught it that way. Eleanor set down her glass, stood, walked toward the piano. The CFO called after her, "Ms. Whitfield, is everything—" She didn't hear him. She was watching Adrian's left hand, the way it trembled, the way the pinky couldn't quite reach, the scar tissue visible along the wrist, surgical scars, old ones, the kind that come from plates and screws. This man had been injured, badly, and he was still sitting at a concert grand trying to play. Adrian pressed the first three notes again, C, E-flat, G. Slower this time, letting each one breathe the way Graves always insisted. The silence between notes is where the music lives. Eleanor stopped walking. She was 15 feet from the piano, close enough to see the rain still dripping from Adrian's jacket onto the bench, close enough to see his eyes, closed now, the way a man closes his eyes when he's talking to someone who isn't in the room anymore. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself the day Graves died. Stop! The word came out before she made a conscious decision to speak. It wasn't loud. But Eleanor Whitfield had spent 40 years in boardrooms and concert halls, and her voice had learned to carry without volume. The guard stopped. Vincent turned. Let him play. Vincent's smile curdled. Ma'am, this man is Tress. I own 15% of this hotel chain. Eleanor didn't look at Vincent. She looked at Adrian. That man stays, and if anyone touches him again, I will have this franchise reviewed by Monday morning. Silence. Vincent's mouth worked like a fish pulled from water. Craig released Adrian's arm, the arm he'd grabbed again when Adrian sat down. The lobby held its breath. Eleanor walked to the piano, stood beside it, looked down at the man sitting on the sanitized bench in his torn jacket with rain in his beard. Where did you learn that piece? She asked, quietly, just for him. Adrian opened his eyes. Professor Graves, Whitmore Conservatory, a long time ago. Eleanor's hand gripped the edge of the piano lid. Play, she said. The whole thing. Adrian looked at Eleanor, then at the lobby, full of people who had just watched him get dragged across the floor. Then at Vincent Hale, who was standing 6 feet away with his arms crossed and his jaw set, waiting for the embarrassment to continue. Then he looked at the keys. He placed his right hand first. C. Just C. One note. He let it ring. Let the Steinways sustain fill the lobby the way water fills a glass. Slowly, completely, until there was no room for anything else. Then his left hand, E-flat.
The note wobbled. His pinky slid slightly. The scar tissue pulled. But the tone held. Not perfectly, but enough. G, the third note. The chord was complete. C minor. The opening of Graves' sonata. And then Adrian began to play. The first movement was adagio. Slow. Measured. A melody that moved like a man walking through an empty house, opening doors to rooms where someone used to live. The right hand carried it, a descending line that curled back on itself, each phrase ending a half step lower than the last, pulling the listener down into something they couldn't name but recognized. Grief. That's what it was. Graves had written it for his first wife, and the music carried her absence the way a river carries a stone, invisibly, constantly, reshaping everything it touched. Adrian's left hand struggled in the lower register. The octave leaps were imprecise. The bass notes arrived a fraction late. Not enough for most people to hear, but enough for Eleanor, who closed her eyes and pressed her fingers against her thigh, playing along from memory. But by the second page, something shifted. Adrian's left hand steadied, not because the damage healed, because his right hand compensated, carrying more weight, filling gaps, covering the moments where his left couldn't reach. It was like watching a man run with a limp, not graceful, but relentless, and somehow more beautiful for the imperfection. A woman in a white dress near the elevator stopped talking mid-sentence. Her companion turned toward the piano. Then the couple next to them. Then the family by the window. One by one, the lobby went quiet. The second movement was allegro agitato, fast, angry. Graves had written it about the months after his wife's death. The rage, the bargaining, the conversations with God that went unanswered. The right hand attacked the upper register in sharp staccato bursts, while the left drove a relentless bass pattern underneath. Adrian leaned into it, his jaw clenched, his shoulders hunched. The rain, still dripping from his jacket, fell onto the keys, tiny droplets on ivory that caught the light like tears on a face. The music filled the lobby the way a storm fills a valley. It bounced off marble and glass and vaulted ceilings and came back, amplified, layered, alive. The Steinway Model D was built for concert halls that seat 2,000. In the enclosed space of the Grand Meridian lobby, it was overwhelming. A bartender set down the glass he was polishing. A chef emerged from the kitchen doors, still wearing his apron. A housekeeper on the mezzanine leaned over the railing. Vincent Hale uncrossed his arms. His smirk was gone. The third movement was andante con moto, walking pace, gentle. This was the part of Graves' sonata that Eleanor loved most. The reconciliation, the acceptance. A melody that climbed instead of descended, that opened instead of closed. It moved through major keys like sunlight moving across a wall, warm and slow and impossible to hold. Adrian's touch changed. Softer. His damaged left hand found a voice. Not the voice it used to have, but a new one. Fragile. Tender. The notes from his left hand sounded like whispers alongside the right hand's clear song, and somehow that contrast made it more. The little girl from earlier, the one who'd asked her mother if she could play, was sitting cross-legged on the marble floor. Her mouth was slightly open. Her mother had stopped trying to pull her away. 12 minutes. That's how long the sonata lasted. 12 minutes in which the Grand Meridian lobby became something it was never designed to be. A concert hall. Adrian played the final passage, a simple ascending scale in the right hand. C,
D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, while the left held the single sustained bass note underneath. The last note hung in the air. Then silence.
5 seconds of absolute silence. The kind of silence that only exists after music, when the air is still vibrating, but no one wants to be the first to break it. Then the little girl clapped. Just her. Small hands making a sound like a bird taking flight. Then her mother. Then the bartender. Then the chef. Then the couple by the window. Then the bellhop. Then the concierge. Then every single person in the Grand Meridian lobby. 200 guests, staff, kitchen workers who'd come out to listen. Standing ovation for a homeless man sitting on a sanitized bench in a torn jacket, playing a dead man's sonata on a piano he'd been told he wasn't allowed to touch. Eleanor stood beside the Steinway, tears on her face, not the polite kind, the kind that fall before you realize they've started. She understood now. This wasn't just a student who had learned Graves' sonata. This was the student Graves had talked about before he died. The one he'd entrusted with the piece. The last one. I gave the sonata to one student, Graves had told her. The only one who understood what it meant. She'd spent 8 years looking for that student. He'd been sleeping under overpasses the entire time. Someone in the back of the lobby held up a phone. The red recording light had been on for 11 minutes. The video was already uploading. The title read, "Homeless Man Plays $500,000 Piano. Security Tried to Stop Him." Within an hour, it would have 100,000 views. By midnight, 2 million. And by morning, the whole world would know Adrian Ashworth's name. Eleanor didn't speak for a long time after the applause faded. She stood next to the piano, one hand resting on the lid, staring at Adrian the way you stare at a photograph you thought you'd lost forever. Not at his torn jacket, not at his muddy boots, at his hands, still on the keys, still trembling, still holding the shape of the last chord. "Come with me," she said. Adrian looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, from the effort of playing through pain for 12 straight minutes. "I'm not going to hurt you," Eleanor said. "I just want to talk." She turned to Vincent Hale. The general manager was standing near the concierge desk, arms rigid at his sides, the smirk completely gone from his face. "Have a meal sent to my suite," Eleanor said. "For 2. Vincent opened his mouth. Now! 20 minutes later, Adrian was sitting in a suite that cost more per night than he'd earned in the last 3 years combined. A white tablecloth, silver cutlery, a plate of roasted chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans, the kind of meal that most people wouldn't think twice about. Adrian ate with his hands for the first 30 seconds, before he caught himself and picked up the fork. Eleanor pretended not to notice. She waited until he'd finished before she spoke. "Theodore Graves was my teacher," she said. "I studied with him for 2 years. I was 23. He was already the most brilliant musician I'd ever met, and he terrified me." Adrian set down his fork. "He terrified everyone." "He used to say, 'The piano doesn't care who you are. It only cares whether you're telling the truth.'" Adrian closed his eyes. "He said that to me on my first lesson." Eleanor leaned forward. "Theodore died in 2016. I was with him in the hospital the last week. He could barely speak, but he told me something I've never forgotten." She paused. Let the silence sit. "He said, 'I gave the sonata to one student, the only one who understood what it meant. Find him, Eleanor. He's the one who should carry it forward.'" Adrian's breath caught.
I've been looking for that student for 8 years, Eleanor said. I went to Whitmore. They had no record of you. Your file was purged when you withdrew. I hired a private investigator. He found nothing. It was like you disappeared.
I did disappear, Adrian said quietly.
Tell me.
And he told her everything. Catherine, the night shift, the sold car, the cracked middle C, the scholarship, Graves, the accident, the rain, the truck, the shattered wrist, the surgeons who rebuilt his hand but couldn't rebuild his future, the revoked scholarship, the jobs, the apartments, the shelters, the streets. 8 years. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When he finished, the suite was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint sound of traffic 20 floors below. Show me your hand, she said. Adrian extended his left wrist. The scars ran in parallel lines, 2 surgical incisions, each about 3 inches long, the skin puckered and pale against his dark complexion. Eleanor touched them gently. She could feel the edges of the titanium plates underneath. You played the entire sonata with this. It's not what it used to be. No, Eleanor said. It's better. Because it costs you something now. Every note from that hand is a choice. Graves would have loved that.
She pulled out her phone, dialed the number.
Samantha, it's Eleanor Whitfield. I need you to see someone. Tomorrow. A pause. His left wrist. Multiple fractures, old repair, significant loss of dexterity. I want you to tell me what's possible. Another pause. I don't care about your schedule. Move it.
She hung up, looked at Adrian.
Dr. Samantha Perry, best hand surgeon on the East Coast. She rebuilt a violinist's hand after a motorcycle accident 3 years ago. The violinist is performing at the Met next month.
Adrian shook his head.
I can't afford.
Did I ask you about money? The words hung in the air. Adrian stared at her. Something behind his eyes cracked. Not broke, cracked. The way ice cracks in spring. Not all at once, just enough to let the light through.
Why?
He whispered.
You don't know me.
I know Theodore Graves trusted you with the most personal piece of music he ever wrote. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are.
While they sat in that suite, the lobby video was doing what lobby videos do in the age of the internet. 100,000 views in the first hour. 2 million by midnight. The title, Homeless Man Plays $500,000 Piano, Security Tried to Stop Him, was engineered for clicks, and it delivered. But it wasn't just the music that went viral. It was the sanitizer. The clip of Vincent Hale squeezing hand sanitizer onto the bench and wiping it with a monogrammed handkerchief. That 15-second segment was extracted, reposted, and shared 40 million times in 72 hours. Hashtag Let Him Play trended worldwide. Hashtag Fire Vincent Hale trended right behind it. Comment sections filled with rage. News outlets called the Grand Meridian for comment. The hotel's PR team released a statement calling the incident inconsistent with our values, a sentence so hollow it generated its own wave of mockery. And Vincent Hale, the man who had sprayed the bench, called Adrian a stray and invited the lobby to laugh at him, sat in his office watching his name trend for all the wrong reasons. He hadn't been fired yet, but the morning was coming. Dr. Samantha Perry looked at Adrian's x-rays for 11 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "Whoever did the original surgery saved your hand, but they didn't save it for piano. They saved it for daily function, opening jars, holding a pen.
The plate placement restricts ulnar deviation by about 30%. That's why your pinky can't reach. Can you fix it? Eleanor asked.
I can replace the plates, reposition them, give him back about 85% of his original range. She looked at Adrian. 85, not 100. You need to understand that. 85 is enough, Adrian said. It was the first time he'd spoken with certainty in 8 years. The surgery took 4 hours. Eleanor paid for everything. The procedure, the hospital stay, the physical therapy that followed. She didn't write a check. She wired the money before Adrian woke up from anesthesia. 3 months of rehabilitation. A physical therapist named Grace, who made Adrian squeeze rubber balls and stretch elastic bands until his forearm burned. A rented studio apartment, Eleanor's doing, 3 blocks from a practice space she'd arranged at Whitfield Concert Hall's East Wing. Adrian practiced 6 hours a day, sometimes 7. The left hand came back slowly, like a language you haven't spoken in years. The words are there, the grammar is there, but the fluency takes time. By the 2nd month, he could play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat without pain. By the 3rd, he could play Liszt's Liebestraum with only minor hesitation in the left-hand arpeggios. By the 4th, he played Grave's Sonata in C minor from beginning to end and didn't miss a single note. He called Eleanor. I'm ready. Eleanor had been planning the opening of her 6th concert hall, Whitfield Hall, downtown, in the same city where Adrian had slept under the overpass on 3rd and Market. 2,000 seats, a Steinway Model D on stage, not behind velvet ropes, on stage, where it belonged. She'd already reserved opening night for Adrian. She'd done it the day after the surgery, before he'd even started therapy. She never told him that. Opening night, she said. 2,000 seats. Sold out. Sold out? The video has 85 million views, Adrian. Everyone knows your name. Opening night, October 12th. Adrian stood backstage in a tuxedo that Eleanor's tailor had fitted 3 times to get right. His hands were steady. His left wrist ached. It would always ache. But the fingers moved. He walked onto the stage. The applause started before he reached the bench. 2,000 people, standing, clapping. For a man who, 4 months ago, had been sleeping on concrete. Adrian sat down, adjusted the bench, looked out at the audience. A sea of faces, most of them strangers, all of them here because they'd watched a video of a homeless man being humiliated, and then watched him play his way through it. He played the sonata in C minor, all 3 movements, 16 minutes, 4 minutes longer than the lobby performance, because now he had the left hand to fill in the passages he'd had to abbreviate before. But at the end, he added something new. A coda. 60 seconds of music he'd composed himself in the practice room at 3 in the morning. Tears on the keys, thinking about a woman who sold her car so her son could play piano. The coda was in C major, bright, simple. It sounded like a door opening into sunlight. Standing ovation. 4 minutes. The longest 4 minutes of Adrian's life. In the 3rd row, a little girl named Lily, 7 years old, the same girl from the Grand Meridian lobby, sat with her mother. After the ovation, she ran to the edge of the stage. "Can you teach me?" she called up. Adrian knelt down, smiled. Of course, pianos are made to be played. 2 days after opening night, the Grand Meridian Hotel issued a formal public apology. The statement named Vincent Hale directly and confirmed his termination. Vincent left the building with a cardboard box. No one held the door for him. The teenager who'd recorded the lobby video was interviewed by CNN.
She said, "I started filming because I thought it was wrong. I kept filming because the music made me cry."
Today, Adrian Ashworth is the artist in residence at Whitfield Concert Hall. He has an apartment with a kitchen and a bed and a door that locks. He has health insurance. He has a phone. He has shoes with laces. Small things. The kind of things most people never think about. Adrian thinks about them every day.
He performs 4 times a year. Always the sonata in C minor, always with the coda he wrote for his mother. Every performance sells out. Every performance gets a standing ovation. Not because the audience feels sorry for him, because the music is that good. But performing isn't what Adrian spends most of his time doing.
Every Saturday morning, in the basement rehearsal room of Whitfield Hall, Adrian teaches piano. Free. No auditions, no prerequisites, no velvet ropes. Just a room with 2 upright pianos and a sign on the door that reads, 3 Notes Foundation. All are welcome. His students are kids from shelters, kids from group homes, kids whose parents work double shifts and can't afford lessons, kids who look the way Adrian looked 20 years ago, hungry for something they can't name but know they need. Lily is his first student. She's 8 now. She can play Fior-Elise with both hands. Her mother drives her 40 minutes each way every Saturday. Neither of them has ever missed a class.
Eleanor and Adrian perform a duet every year on the anniversary of Theodore Graves' death. They play the sonata in C minor together, 4 hands on 1 piano. Eleanor takes the upper register. Adrian takes the lower. The piece Graves wrote from grief has become something else now. A bridge between a teacher and his students, between loss and what comes after.
The Grand Meridian Hotel still has the Steinway Model D in its lobby, but the brass plaque has been replaced. The new one reads, "Please play." The original video, "Homeless Man Plays $500,000 Piano, Security Tried to Stop Him," has 140 million views. It's been translated into 31 languages. It's been shown in music schools. It's been cited in 2 congressional hearings on homelessness. Adrian was interviewed last year by a journalist who asked him what he'd want people to take away from his story. He thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "People looked at me and saw a homeless man. They saw the torn jacket and the dirty hands and the boots with no laces, and they decided I was nothing. But inside these hands, even the broken one, there was always music. It never left. It was just waiting for someone to listen." Man, we almost missed him. Think about that. What if Eleanor wasn't there? He'd still be invisible. Now ask yourself, how many people did you walk past today without looking? Drop that in the comments. Share this. Subscribe. Stories like this need to be heard.